Long time ago, in the bustling city of Ibadan, Oyo State, there lived a young lady called Simbi. Simbi's life had taken a turn she never imagined. At the age of 20, she was caught in the grip of prostitution, a profession she was forced into by circumstances she couldn't control. Her youth was stolen, and her dreams were shattered. Simbi's existence was a continuous cycle of despair, each night blending into the next, each client another face she would forget. Her only solace came from her sister, who, despite the stigma and the danger, never abandoned her. Simbi's sister was her anchor, constantly urging her to leave the life that was slowly killing her. "Simbi, you have to think of your future," she would say, her voice filled with both love and desperation. "This life will destroy you. Think about the baby you are carrying." Simbi was 2 months pregnant, a fact that filled her with both hope and dread. The child growing inside her was a reminder of her past, a result of encounters she wished she could erase. Her sister's words echoed in her mind, but the fear of leaving the only life she knew paralyzed her. The unknown was terrifying, and Simbi felt trapped, her decisions influenced by the shadows of her past. One fateful evening, after a particularly rough encounter, she sat alone in her small room. The silence was oppressive, and the weight of her choices bore down on her. It was then that her sister's advice broke through the fog of despair. For the sake of her unborn child, she decided to leave prostitution. It wasn't an easy decision, and the path ahead was uncertain, but Simbi knew she had to try. A month later, she took her first steps towards a new life. The transition was not smooth. She struggled to find work, faced with the stigma of her past. Yet, she persevered, driven by the hope of a better future for her child. As Simbi embarked on her new life in Ibadan, she faced numerous challenges. The stigma of her past lingered, and finding legitimate work was a daunting task. Yet, she was resolute, driven by the need to create a stable future for her unborn child. Days turned into weeks, and just as she began to despair, fate intervened in the most unexpected way. One sunny afternoon, Simbi decided to visit a bustling mall in the heart of Ibadan for a little shopping, hoping to escape her worries, if only for a little while. She wandered through the shelves, lost in thought, when she heard a familiar voice call out her name. Startled, she turned to see Oladotun, one of her former clients. Her heart raced as a mix of emotions flooded her: fear, shame, and a sliver of hope. Oladotun, a successful businessman, had always been kind to Simbi during their brief encounters. His eyes lit up with genuine surprise and concern as he asked where she had been. Simbi, initially hesitant, decided to confide in him. She shared her story, detailing her decision to leave prostitution and her current struggles. Oladotun listened intently, his expression softening with each word she spoke. Moved by her plight, Oladotun made an unexpected offer. "Simbi, you deserve a chance at a better life," he said gently. "If you would agree, I would like to help you. I can provide the stability and support you need." Oladotun paused before continuing, "Will you marry me?" Simbi was taken aback by the proposal. The idea of marrying one of her former clients was startling, but Oladotun's compassion and sincerity were undeniable. Desperation and hope intertwined as she realized this could be the chance she needed. Without much hesitation, she accepted his proposal, her heart filled with a cautious optimism. Within weeks, Simbi and Oladotun were married. For the first time in years, Simbi felt a sense of security and hope for the future. Oladotun embraced her unborn child as his own, despite knowing the uncertain circumstances of its conception. Their life together marked the beginning of a new chapter for Simbi, one filled with promise and the potential for healing. The marriage of Simbi and Oladotun marked a profound turning point in Simbi's life. For the first time in years, she experienced stability and security, a stark contrast to her tumultuous past. Oladotun's unwavering support and kindness helped Simbi transition into her new role as a wife and soon-to-be mother. Despite the shadows of her previous life, Simbi embraced this fresh start with hope and determination. As her pregnancy progressed, Simbi settled into their modest but comfortable home in Ibadan. Oladotun's business provided well for their needs, and he was a caring and attentive husband. He treated Simbi with a tenderness that was unfamiliar but deeply comforting. His acceptance of her unborn child as his own eased many of her fears and insecurities. Months passed, and Simbi gave birth to a healthy baby boy, whom they named Olu. The arrival of Olu brought immense joy to the couple. Simbi's heart swelled with a love she had never known, and she vowed to protect and nurture her son, giving him the life she never had. Oladotun, too, was overjoyed, embracing Olu as his own flesh and blood. Their family continued to grow with the births of 2 daughters, Peju and Shelwa. The household was filled with laughter and the chaos of young children. Simbi found herself busier than ever, but also happier than she had ever been. The sense of belonging and purpose that motherhood brought her was a balm to the wounds of her past. Oladotun proved to be a devoted father, balancing his business responsibilities with time spent with his family. He took great pride in teaching Olu, Peju, and Shelwa about life, instilling values of kindness, integrity, and perseverance. The children adored him, and the family thrived in the warmth of his love and guidance. Years passed, and Olu grew into a bright and active young man. The family, now complete with the addition of Peju and Shelwa, seemed to live an idyllic life in Ibadan. The children's laughter often echoed through their home, a testament to the love and harmony Simbi and Oladotun had cultivated. Simbi found immense joy in her role as a mother, and Oladotun's unwavering support made their household a safe haven. However, fate had other plans. One fateful afternoon, as the family gathered in their cozy living room, Olu suddenly felt a wave of dizziness. The room spun around him, and before anyone could react, he collapsed onto the floor. Panic seized the family as they rushed to his side. Oladotun scooped his son up, his heart pounding with fear, and they quickly made their way to the nearest hospital. At the hospital, the family was met by Dr. Oyekala, a seasoned physician known for his expertise and calm demeanor. After a thorough examination, Dr. Oyekala delivered the unsettling news. Olu was suffering from severe anemia and urgently needed a blood transfusion. The diagnosis left Simbi and Oladotun in a state of shock and disbelief. Desperate to save their son, Simbi and Oladotun, along with Peju and Shelwa, underwent blood tests to determine if any of them could be donors. The results were disheartening. None of their blood types matched Olu's. The realization hit Simbi like a tidal wave, reigniting the dormant fears and secrets of her past. Oladotun, although worried, focused on finding a solution, his concern for Olu outweighing any suspicion. Dr. Oyekala, aware of the urgency, assured the family that they would find a compatible donor. Despite his reassurance, the atmosphere was heavy with tension and uncertainty. Simbi felt a deep sense of guilt and fear, knowing the truth about Olu's uncertain paternity could come to light. The days that followed were a blur of worry and frantic efforts to locate a suitable donor. Friends, extended family, and even strangers came forward to help, but none matched Olu's rare blood type. As Olu's condition worsened, Simbi's anxiety grew. She spent sleepless nights praying for a miracle, hoping that somehow her son would be saved without the secrets of her past unraveling. The hospital became a second home for Simbi and Oladotun as they watched over Olu, whose condition seemed to deteriorate with each passing day. Despite Dr. Oyekala's efforts to reassure them, the reality of their situation was grim. Olu's anemia required immediate intervention, and the urgency to find a matching blood donor became paramount. Simbi's anxiety was palpable. She spent hours by Olu's bedside, holding his hand and whispering words of comfort, though her heart was heavy with fear and guilt. She replayed the choices she had made, wondering if they would come back to haunt her. Each negative test result brought her closer to the edge, the weight of her secret pressing down on her. Oladotun, ever the pillar of strength, rallied their friends and extended family. They spread the word far and wide, hoping to find a donor among the community. The response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life came forward, driven by compassion and a desire to help. Yet, despite the outpouring of support, the elusive match remained undiscovered. As the days dragged on, the hospital staff became deeply invested in Olu's case. Nurses and doctors went above and beyond, testing countless volunteers and scouring blood banks, but every lead turned up empty. The strain on Simbi and Oladotun was immense. Their daughters, Peju and Shelwa, sensed the tension and grew quieter, their youthful energy dampened by the gravity of the situation. In a twist of fate, it was during this time of crisis that an unexpected hero emerged, offering a lifeline that would change their lives forever. One afternoon, while Simbi was in the hospital chapel, praying for a miracle, Dr. Oyekala received a visit from his old friend Akinlabi. Akinlabi, intrigued by the unusual flurry of activity, inquired about the situation. Dr. Oyekala explained Olu's dire need for a blood transfusion and the difficulty in finding a match. Akinlabi, moved by the story, offered to be tested despite the long odds. Miraculously, Akinlabi's blood was a perfect match. The news brought a glimmer of hope to the beleaguered family. Olu received the transfusion, and his condition began to stabilize. Simbi and Oladotun were overwhelmed with gratitude, though they still did not know the identity of the donor. During one of her visits to the hospital, Simbi encountered Dr. Oyekala in the hallway. His expression was a mix of relief and contemplation. Sensing her unspoken questions, he decided to share the story of the stranger who had volunteered to help. Akinlabi is an old friend of mine, Dr. Oyekala began. He happened to visit the hospital while we were in the midst of the desperate search for a donor. When I told him about Olu's situation, he immediately offered to be tested. We were all astonished when his blood turned out to be a perfect match. Simbi listened intently, her heart pounding. She was filled with gratitude for this man she had never met, yet there was an inexplicable anxiety gnawing at her. She thanked Dr. Oyekala, profusely expressed a desire to meet Akinlabi, but the doctor informed her that he had left shortly after the transfusion, not seeking any recognition. Throughout the ordeal, Simbi's thoughts remained tangled with worry. She was grateful for the miraculous match but anxious about what it might uncover. Little did she know, the connection between Akinlabi and Olu was more profound than she could ever imagine, setting the stage for revelations that would soon come to light. As Olu's condition improved, the family tried to return to a semblance of normalcy. Yet, the encounter with Akinlabi lingered in Simbi's mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that his sudden appearance and perfect match were more than mere coincidence. Her thoughts often drifted back to the past, to the time before she had left her old life behind. Meanwhile, Akinlabi found himself thinking about the boy with the birthmark. He had been struck by the uncanny resemblance to his own, a distinctive mark that ran in his family. The curiosity grew into a quiet obsession. He began visiting the hospital more frequently under the guise of checking on Olu's progress, driven by a need to understand this connection. During one of these visits, Akinlabi finally saw Olu up close and noticed the birthmark on his wrist. It was identical to his own. Akinlabi's heart raced as he connected the dots, his thoughts spinning with the implications. Could this boy be related to him? The possibility was both thrilling and terrifying. As Olu continued to recover, Akinlabi couldn't shake the eerie feeling of familiarity he had experienced when he saw the birthmark on Olu's wrist. The distinctive mark, an unusual crescent shape, was identical to one he and several of his family members bore. It was more than a coincidence, Akinlabi thought. It was a family trait, a hereditary symbol that had been passed down through generations. One afternoon, unable to quell his curiosity any longer, Akinlabi approached Olu's hospital room. With a calm demeanor masking his inner turmoil, he asked Olu if he could speak with him. Olu, still weak but recovering steadily, nodded in agreement. Akinlabi gently broached the subject. "That mark on your wrist," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's quite unique. I have the same mark as does my father and his father before him. Do you know where yours came from?" Olu looked down at his wrist, his brow furrowing in thought. "I've had it for as long as I can remember," he replied. "My mom never really talked about it. I always thought it was just a birthmark, nothing special." Akinlabi's heart raced as he heard this. He had to know more. "Do you know anything about your father?" he asked cautiously, aware of the sensitivity of the topic. Olu, looking puzzled, responded, "My father is Oladotun. He's always been there for me. But now that you mention it, my birthmark has always made me curious. I've never asked my mom about it." Akinlabi's suspicions deepened. He needed to speak with Simbi. He left Olu's room with a sense of urgency, heading straight to Dr. Oyekala's office. The doctor was surprised to see him again so soon, but listened as Akinlabi explained his concerns and the significance of the birthmark. "We need to talk to Simbi," Akinlabi insisted. "There's a connection here, something that we need to uncover." Later that day, Simbi arrived at the hospital to visit Olu. As she entered his room, she was met with the sight of Akinlabi and Dr. Oyekala. Her heart skipped a beat, and a cold sweat broke out on her forehead. She recognized Akinlabi immediately, though she had hoped never to see him again. Olu, sensing the tension, decided to address the elephant in the room. "Mom," he began hesitantly. "Who is my father? I mean, is there something about our family that I should know?" Simbi's heart pounded. She had dreaded this moment, and now it was here. She struggled to find the words, her mind racing with memories and fears. Instead of answering, she looked at Akinlabi, her eyes pleading for understanding. Akinlabi's eyes locked onto hers with a mixture of shock and recognition. "Simbi," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Simbi's world tilted on its axis as she realized the significance of this meeting. The past she had tried so hard to bury was resurfacing, threatening to unravel the life she had built. The presence of Akinlabi, the questions about the birthmark, and the truth about Olu's paternity. All these elements converged, setting the stage for a revelation that would shake the foundations of her family. The air was thick with tension as Simbi took a deep breath, preparing to confront the ghosts of her past. She knew that the moment of truth had arrived, and there was no turning back. The past she had so carefully hidden was now staring her in the face, demanding to be acknowledged. Dr. Oyekala stood nearby, his expression one of concern and curiosity. "Simbi, we need to talk," Akinlabi began, his voice a mix of urgency and gentleness. "There are things about Olu and this birthmark that we need to understand. Please, tell me everything." Simbi hesitated, her mind racing. She glanced at Olu, who looked back with confusion and worry. She knew this moment would change everything, but she couldn't keep the truth hidden any longer. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. 20 years ago, she started, her voice trembling. I was a different person. I was caught in a life I'm not proud of, doing things I never wanted to do. During that time, I became pregnant, and I didn't know who the father was because of the nature of my work. When I decided to leave that life behind, I met Oladotun. He saved me in many ways and accepted Olu as his own, even though he knew the truth. Akinlabi listened intently, his eyes widening as he connected the dots. Simbi, do you remember me? He asked softly. Simbi nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. Yes, Akinlabi, I remember you. You were one of my clients during that time. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Akinlabi's presence in Olu's life could change everything, and she wasn't sure how Oladotun would react or how their family dynamics would shift. Dr. Oyekala, sensing the gravity of the moment, spoke gently. This is a lot to process for everyone, but what matters now is that Olu is recovering, and he has the support of his family, however that family looks. Simbi nodded, wiping her tears. She looked at Akinlabi, gratitude and apprehension in her eyes. Thank you for helping Olu, she said quietly. No matter what happens next, I'm grateful for that. Simbi and Akinlabi stood in silence, the weight of the revelation hanging heavily in the room. Just then, Oladotun entered, his face etched with concern. He had heard the urgency in Simbi's voice when she had called him on the phone to the hospital and had rushed over, fearing the worst. Oladotun, there's something we need to discuss, Simbi began, her voice steady yet laced with tension. She took a deep breath, glancing at Akinlabi, then back at Oladotun. Oladotun nodded, his eyes moving from Simbi to Akinlabi, sensing the gravity of the situation. What's going on? He asked, his voice calm but firm. This is Akinlabi, Simbi said, gesturing toward him. He's the one who donated blood for Olu. There's more to it, she paused though. Akinlabi has the same birthmark as Olu. We believe he's Olu's biological father. Oladotun remained composed, a quiet understanding settling over him. I always knew that Olu wasn't biologically mine, he said gently. Simbi told me everything before we got married, but it didn't matter to me. I chose to be his father, and I love him as my own. Akinlabi looked at Oladotun, his respect for the man growing. Thank you for being there for Olu, he said. I never knew about him, and I'm grateful he had you. Oladotun nodded. Olu is our son, Simbi and mine, but it's clear that you have a connection with him, Akinlabi. How do we proceed from here? Simbi stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. Oladotun, you've been more than I could have ever hoped for as a husband and a father to our children. I want to ensure that whatever we do, it's in Olu's best interest. He needs to know the truth, but he also needs to know that he's loved by all of us. Oladotun looked at Simbi, then at Akinlabi. We tell him the truth, he said resolutely. He deserves to know where he comes from, but he also needs to know that our love for him hasn't changed. Akinlabi nodded in agreement. I want to be part of his life, but I don't want to disrupt what he has with you, Oladotun. We need to handle this with care. Simbi, Oladotun, and Akinlabi stood united in their decision. They knew that the path ahead would be challenging, but they were committed to facing it together for Olu's sake. They prepared to share the truth with him, knowing that their love and support would guide them through the uncertainties that lay ahead. The moment had come for Simbi, Oladotun, and Akinlabi to sit down with Olu and share the truth that had been unearthed. The atmosphere in the hospital room was tense, the air thick with anticipation and concern. Olu, still recovering but alert and curious, sensed the gravity of the moment. Simbi took a deep breath, her eyes meeting Olu's. "Olu, there's something important we need to talk to you about," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "You know how much we love you and how much you mean to us. There's something about your past, about your father, that you need to know." The room fell silent as the weight of Simbi's words sank in. Olu looked between his mother, Oladotun and Akinlabi, his confusion deepening. "Mom, what does this mean?" he asked, his voice breaking. Akinlabi stepped forward, placing a hand on Olu's shoulder. "Olu, the birthmark you and I share is a family trait. It's a mark that has been passed down through generations. When I saw it on you, I knew there had to be a connection. Simbi, I think I'm Olu's biological father. Because I remembered 20 years ago when I patronized you in that hotel at Ibadan and how I hurriedly left the room after what we did, when I received a phone call from my boss in Lagos that I should report to my base in Apapa for an urgent assignment immediately. I was in Lagos for 6 months before I returned back to Ibadan. I visited the same hotel one day, asked about you, but no one was able to give me a clue of where I can find you. And I'll believe that is how we lost contact, since I didn't have your mobile number." Simbi's tears flowed freely now, a mix of relief and fear. She had carried the burden of her past alone for so long, and now the truth was out. Oladotun stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Olu's shoulder. "Son, you've always known me as your father, and that will never change. But there's more to your story, and it's time you learned the truth." Akinlabi, standing nearby, felt the weight of the moment. "Olu, when I donated blood to you, I noticed something familiar. You have a birthmark on your wrist that's identical to mine. This birthmark runs in my family." Olu looked down at his wrist, the familiar mark now taking on new significance. "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Simbi continued, her voice soft but firm. "Olu, Akinlabi is your biological father. When I was pregnant with you, I didn't know who your father was due to the circumstances of my past. When I met Oladotun, he accepted you as his own and has loved you like a true father ever since." The room fell silent as Olu processed the information. His eyes darted between the 3 adults, each one a pillar in his life. "So, Mr. Akinlabi is my real father?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Yes," Akinlabi replied gently, "but that doesn't change the love and bond you have with Oladotun. He is as much your father as I am, if not more." Olu took a moment to absorb the revelation, his emotions swirling. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, tears welling up in his eyes. "I love you, Dad," he said, turning to Oladotun, "and I'm grateful for everything you've done for me." Oladotun hugged Olu tightly. "I love you too, son. Nothing will ever change that." Akinlabi stepped closer, his eyes filled with warmth. "I'm here for you, Olu, if you want to get to know me. I don't want to disrupt your life, but I do want to be a part of it, if you'll have me." Olu nodded slowly, a tentative smile forming. "I think I'd like that," he said. "I'd like to get to know you." The 3 men stood united, with Simbi watching with tears of relief and happiness. They had navigated a difficult truth with honesty and love, setting the foundation for a new chapter in their lives, where family bonds were strengthened and new relationships were forged. The revelation of Olu's true parentage had set the family on a path of introspection. The weeks that followed were filled with difficult conversations and emotional moments, but also with the promise of a stronger bond. Olu, now fully recovered, faced the truth with a maturity that surprised even himself. The knowledge that Akinlabi was his biological father added a new dimension to his identity, but it didn't diminish his love for Oladotun, the man who had raised him. Simbi, Oladotun, and Akinlabi worked together to navigate this complex new reality. They decided to hold a family meeting at their home in Ibadan, where they could talk openly and set the foundation for their future interactions. Peju and Shelwa, though initially confused, were included in these discussions, ensuring that the entire family moved forward together. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, they all gathered in the living room. The atmosphere was a mix of anticipation and resolve. Simbi began the conversation, her voice steady and filled with emotion. "Olu, Peju, Shelwa, we've all been through a lot recently," she said. "But I want you to know that no matter what, our love for you hasn't changed. We're a family, and that's what matters most." Olu nodded, his eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. "I understand, Mom. There's been a lot to take in, but I'm glad we're talking about it. I want to know more about Mr. Akinlabi and our family history." Akinlabi, who had been sitting quietly, leaned forward. "Olu, I'm here to answer any questions you have. I want to be part of your life, but I also respect the incredible role Oladotun has played. He's been an amazing father to you, and I'm grateful for that." Oladotun smiled, his respect for Akinlabi evident. "We're in this together," he said. "Olu, you're fortunate to have so many people who care about you. We'll figure this out as a family." The conversation flowed naturally, with Olu asking questions about Akinlabi's family and heritage. He learned about the history behind the distinctive birthmark and heard stories of his ancestors, which helped him feel a deeper connection to his roots. Akinlabi, in turn, expressed his admiration for Simbi's strength and resilience, and his gratitude to Oladotun for stepping up as a father. Peju and Shelwa, though younger and less affected by the immediate revelations, were reassured by the unity and love displayed by the adults. They asked questions about their extended family and were excited about the prospect of getting to know Akinlabi better. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the room, the family shared a meal together. Laughter and stories filled the air, and for the first time in weeks, there was a sense of normalcy and peace. The bonds between them, though tested by recent events, were stronger than ever. In the months that followed, Akinlabi became a regular part of their lives. He and Olu developed a close relationship, and Olu visited Akinlabi's family, meeting relatives he had never known. Oladotun and Simbi's marriage grew even stronger as they navigated this new chapter together, their mutual respect and love deepening. The family learned that while the past could not be changed, it could inform a better future. They embraced the complexity of their situation, choosing to focus on the love and support that bound them. In the heart of Ibadan, amidst the challenges and revelations, they found a new dawn, a testament to the enduring strength of family and the unbreakable bonds of love. And that brings us to the end of this wonderful story. If you enjoyed it, Elle would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to share it with your friends and hit the like button to show your support. Thank you for being a part of this experience.